Most people think the UN jobs are glamorous, big offices, meetings, diplomatic moments. But here's the truth. What you see outside is sometimes not what actually happens inside. Today I'm going to tell you the truth about working from the UN through the lens of my experience with UNICEF. I'll touch on the realities and the challenges and the surprises and lessons that no one tells you before you join. I spent 15 plus years working for UNICEF within the United Nations system. And this episode, I wish I had access to it before I joined. Welcome to Small Insight, Big Impact. I am Dr. David Cheche, and we are going to explore ideas as to how we elevate our lives, career, and leadership. So let's dive in. I actually joined UNICEF in the field, so I pretty much got a sense of how things are within the UN because I used to work with most of the staff. But just to set the record straight, there are two categories of staff within the UN. You are the technical or international civil servants that work basically providing technical support and advice. And they are the UN diplomats themselves, which they sort of, in simple terms, like the country representatives of the different UN agencies and other directed. So these two categories are distinct. So if you join as a technical expert on international civil servant, it depends on where you join. If you join in the field, like in emergency situations, the initial experience is different. If you join the regional offices, it's also different. At the headquarters, it's also different. So what I'm trying to tell you is when you join the UN, just remember that you've taken on a huge responsibility and you are not going to see probably maybe a diplomatic picking you up and giving you all those type of welcomes. But then, that's for the technical stuff. But for the executive, that happens. So just to bear that in mind, so that you manage your expectations. But the initial experience is always very good, depending upon where you join. I joined in Sudan, so I had a fairly good idea how the UN works in emergency situations. So that's one thing you need to remember. So today I'm going to share with you very candid 7 lessons that I've learned working for the UN for 15 years plus through the lens of UNICEF, and then actually worked in close collaboration with the other UN agencies as well. So this sort of applies to any of the agencies. The first truth is the UN looks glamorous, but you have to remember it comes with a lot of demand. So as much as you admire the glamorous nature of it, you should also be prepared to take on a lot of demanding tasks because it's not easy. Things like you have to work long hours because of the time zone, probably also depending upon what exactly you are working on and where you are working. And also sometimes the complex political nature of the work also keeps a lot of people on their toes. And there's also emotional heavy load because in most cases you work long hours, you're out of family, you're assigned to remote areas. So these sort of have some emotional drain on you as well. So it is not a job for the faint-hearted, I must put it that way. So you should be prepared to take on difficult tasks, complex tasks, and also be ready to work in every other environment. Matter of fact, there is a clause that when you are appointed that says that the the Secretary General or the head of the mission can assign you to any duty station as per the situation demands. So you should be ready for that. So if you join the UN for prestige, remember you will burn out fast because as I mentioned, you need to be prepared for the tough times. Basically, your purpose should be to serve, and if you have that mindset of serving, you will thrive in the organization. So that's one of the learnings that you need, or the truth that you need to consider. The second truth that I want to share, it's there's always people full of ideas, campaigners and passion and other things with a view to changing the world in minutes or seconds or days. What I would say is slow down a bit because you wouldn't be able to change the world overnight. The UN is huge. There are different aspects of it. So you should just slow down and get yourself rolled out into the system. Take time to understand the UN, how it operates. Yes, your contribution will make a difference, but if you have that you change the world overnight mindset, you will be disappointed. I must be honest with you. So that's one thing you have to remember. Because the UN works slow. Every big organization to effect change is not a simple task. So, and this applies not only to the UN, to government agencies or the big multilaterals as well. So, it's very important you manage your expectations while you enter or join the UN, and with that, you'll be able to sort of go with the flow and still make sure that the different ideas and suggestions that will improve situations and other aspects of the work will eventually roll in and will be heard. The third learning that I want to share with you, it's the field is where everything or the action is. If you join the UN, if you join the field offices, particularly in emergency situations, you get to understand how the UN works better. Not to downplay what our colleagues in headquarters do, but remember the UN was actually set up because of peace and emergency situations, UNICEF others. So the UN thrives or does well in emergency context. So you would get to see how the different aspects of the UN work all come together to make a difference in communities or government institutions. So if you really want to understand the UN more better, and from my experience, I've seen people grown in the UN because they join in the field office, they've been to the hotspots, the emergencies, they rise fast. You know why? Because when they get to the headquarters or regional offices, they understand the context. So they speak to facts, they speak to situations, they've lived the experience. When you speak to issues that you've seen, experienced, and lived, you talk with gravitas. So that sort of gives them the position for them to be able to move forward. So that's just one thing you have to know. If you want to move fast in the UN in terms of promotions and other things, don't run away from the field office. Take on tough emergency assignments, and you'll be well positioned to be taken on. And when you get to headquarters, you talk or you speak with authority because you have the experience around you and you know what is happening in the field. So that's another advice for you. The second, it's the third thing. It's sometimes we all have passion. I want to do this. I'm passionate about this. But in the UN, your skill set matters more than your passion. Because the UN wants to solve problems. They want to deal with issues. So they are looking for people with skills, problem-solving skills. So, in as much as you have passion, which is great, make sure you have the right skill set to be able to provide technical assistance, technical advice, solve problems, or suggest strategy options that will get situations done and also create an environment where the UN is respected, the UN is valued in terms of the contribution it brings to discussions and issues in the global world. The fifth lesson that I think is also worth mentioning, it's, you know, you must lead without authority because of the nature of the UN, how big it is, and the different skill sets that you have within the organization. And as much as you have, I would say, your immediate report or supervisor, and there are a lot of coordinations, collaborations, metrics management type of working that happens within the UN. Because the center of everything is how do we address if it's an emergency, a problem. So they try to put all hands on deck to solve the problem. So if you are caught up in that web of, I want to be the boss, or you report to me, that will also be an issue for you, especially now that the UN is actually very active in coordinating other agencies, not even within the UNICEF, but other sector agencies like the NGOs, government, particularly in emergency situations. So you should be able to develop skills where you can lead without authority, but where you need to sort of exercise authority, that also comes out in a situation that it demands. So that's the fifth lesson that I would share with you. The sixth lesson is you have to be emotionally strong and prepared. You might talked about the UN, working in harsh conditions, different zones, time zones. It's it is consuming. It drains you. For example, when I was in Sudan and my family based in the US, imagine 6-7 hours time zone. Sometimes you have to make calls. You are called into meetings where headquarters, which now they're on different time zones. You have to be part and active, not just only participating in those meetings. You are very active and contributing. There are times you're also deployed to different missions out of your time zone completely. So you need to readjust, calibrate yourself and your mental psyche and everything to get productive. So these things over time drain you, and so you have to be emotionally tough and resilient and stable to be able to work for the UN for a long time. Remember, the UN, most of its act is mainly in emergency situations. So right, they do development as well, but I would say a lot of action, a lot of interventions happen in emergency conditions or situations. The last lesson that I would say it's also very useful for you to consider it. Working for the UN is one of the most meaningful careers in the world. Honestly speaking, because if you get to see the outcome of all the meetings, all the things that you've done in the field, there is this sense of purpose that you feel as an individual and also as a team and organization that you are doing your bit to serve humanity at a scale that is appropriate. So it means the small work that you do, be wherever you are in the field, in the regional office, wherever it is, you get to see the results of that. So it is a meaningful job, and then if you see those results, there's a sense of fulfillment, and there's a sense of helping others to be able to get the basic necessities like water supply, sanitation, and health that others take for granted. So you go to a community where there are no schools, and the UN provides schools, there are no toilets, things like that. So those are things that bring fulfillment to people and those who join. So if you find fulfillment in those actions, then yes, the UN is it's good for you. But just remember what I started off. It is not easy, it is not fast, but it's deeply meaningful. So the question I want to ask you is, do you want to pursue a job with the UN? That's something that you would have to ask yourself. But there are 5 questions that I would suggest that you ask yourself if you really want to consider working for the UN. First question is, are you joining for impact or for status? You need to be very candid about it and answer it to the best of your ability. And then the second question is, do you have this technical skill set that the UN or the UN is requesting, or the type of task that your job that you're applying for? Do you have the relevant technical skill set to be able to make a difference or offer advice? That's also a very good question you need to answer for yourself. The third question, which in my view, it's the most important one. Are you open to challenges, travel, and working in tough environments? Yeah. So this question is where you also have to reassess yourself, because more than 60% of the UN's job is in these harsh or emergency environments. So you should be prepared. Remember, I said there is a clause that says that the UN Secretary General or his appointed executive can assign you to any duty station or any emergency as they see fit. So one day you can be in your house and you get a call or an email that, oh, you need to deploy it to maybe Mozambique for an emergency response. Are you going to say no, or you say yes? So you need to look at that critically. And then the fourth question you should ask yourself is, can you lead through influence? Because remember I told you the UN performs a very critical role in terms of coordinating the response or actions of other agencies, the external agencies, as well as internal agencies. So you should be able to have that skill set as well. And then the last question is more or less has to do with patience and diplomacy, and also a sense of humility. You need to be able to also demonstrate those behaviors to be successful in the UN. So if your answer to these questions are all yes, then you are on the right path. So keep applying based on the experience that I shared in my previous episode, or other routes that sort of you feel that you can use to get into the UN. So that's, do you want the UN job because of its look, or because of its impact? I'm bringing this question up again because you need to be very candid with yourself, and then make sure that you are all in to the job, and not to get the position and all of a sudden say, oops, I never actually thought about it this way. Your answer to these questions that I've just posed will determine whether you succeed in the UN or you will not succeed in the UN. This is Small Insight, Big Impact with Dr. David Churchill. If this episode opens your eyes or tells you a bit more about the inner experience of working for the UN, subscribe or share it with someone dreaming of a global impact. See you in the next episode.